Looks like 6 o'clock, and let's call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. First thing is roll call.
Nyla Fry. Here. Trisha Brown. Sam Kaufman.
Here.
Kristen Rungy.
Here.
Aaron Moran. Here. Joe Zisselsberger.
Here.
Robert McPherson.
Here.
All right, let's confirm. Are we in compliance with open meeting laws?
We are. The draft agenda was published in the Waunakee Tribune on 7/14. The final agenda was posted in all 3 official posting locations on 7/12 and 7/13. And the final agenda and packet were made available online on 7/12. Just 2 notes for the guests in our audience today. Please remember to sign in with your name, address, and municipality for accurate record keeping. And those interested in participating in public comment, please be sure you give me your public comment form prior to the agenda item.
All right, next up on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone that's turned in for public comment?
We have just one, Aurora Liebeck at 1100 Parkview Circle, Waunakee.
All right.
Hi, I'm Aurora Liebeck. Nice to meet you. I was hoping to make a public comment regarding train quiet hours. I actually have a handout for the board, if that's okay to share this, and I can email it. Is that all right? Or do you want me to include it in that? So electronic version so you can have it in the minutes? Yeah, I'll send it to you guys, but if you don't mind if I pass. Till it's green. There we go. Now I can be heard. Thank you. Was specifically regarding the trains coming through at 3 and 4 in the morning. There's a lot of municipalities in Wisconsin that have successfully passed train quiet hours. So if you read through the handout, there's a little bit of history there specifically about what quiet hours means. Essentially, they're not required to blow the horns between whatever hours are set, 11 p and 7 a or 6 a, for example. There would probably be some required safety upgrades to some of the railroad crossings. And on the back of the handout, I listed the 5 at-grade railroad crossings within the village and the current warning devices. The one that I live closest to and is of most concern, I think, is Cup Road, which you guys probably remember was a very rural road not that long ago. And now it's surrounded by developments. It's a very busy crossing and there's only stop signs. There's no lights, there's no warning arms or anything like that. I think it presents a safety hazard, and that one would almost certainly need to be upgraded in order to meet the safety standards required for a quiet zone. So you can read through the handout. I'll email Carla the handout so it can be included in the packet or the public minutes. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to talk afterwards or follow up as needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming today and making that comment. Anyone online or any other comments? All right, no attendees online. All right. The next is the consent agenda. Do we have anything that we would like to pull from the consent agenda?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second it. All right, any discussion on the motion? Nope, seeing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Next up, we have reports and presentations. And if it is okay, I would like to make a motion to take item 1 from presentation, discuss and take action on proclamation of service for Roger Bartels, and move it up to the next item before reports.
Second.
All right, any discussion on the motion? No? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, do we have tonight, the task before us is to approve a proclamation of service for Roger Bartels. Do we have any discussion or anyone would like to make a motion on the proclamation?
We have to read the proclamation first before we do it.
After we pass it.
After,
I goofed it up the first time we did that.
okay.
So
I will motion to, I don't have the motion in front of me. I'm sorry.
it's all right.
It's actually not one in the.
There is, okay, good. I'll motion to approve the proclamation for Lieutenant Bartels.
I'll second it. All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, the motion carries. Move over to the podium. Thank you for being here tonight, first of all. And we are missing the plaque. It's under? All right. Here we go. Moment of panic. Please come up. Stand with me here. You're welcome. Thank you very much for coming today. All right, I'm going to attempt to read it.
All right.
All right, here we go. Proclamation honoring Lieutenant Roger Bartels. Whereas the Village of Waunakee values its employees and entrusts them with providing service to its residents. And whereas Lieutenant Roger Bartels began his career in law enforcement in 1997, serving as a part-time patrol officer for the Village of Potosi. And whereas Lieutenant Roger Bartels has been a long-standing employee of the Village of Waunakee, serving as police lieutenant since 2020. And prior to that, serving as police sergeant and police officer starting in 1999. And whereas the residents of the Village of Waunakee have long enjoyed the benefits of a great police department. And whereas Lieutenant Roger Bartels, for the past 24 years, worked alongside staff at all levels and departments to ensure Waunakee is a safe place for every resident and visitor. And whereas Lieutenant Roger Bartels has been instrumental in helping the Waunakee Police Department protect and serve all people with respect, fairness, and compassion. And whereas Lieutenant Bartels has been dedicated to making the village a better community by contributing to the police department as liaison to the Waunakee Community Cares Coalition. And whereas Lieutenant Bartels coordinated the police department's annual National Night Out event, which focuses on bringing the community and the department together in a positive and uplifting setting, and is a lot of fun. And whereas the village board and the residents of the Village of Waunakee greatly benefit from your devotion, your dedication, and your hard work. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Village Board of Waunakee extends its sincere and heartfelt appreciation to you, Lieutenant Bartels, for your continuing and untiring devotion to the Village of Waunakee, to the village staff, the village residents, and our visitors. Let this resolution be entered into and made part of the permanent records of the Village of Waunakee, and let a copy be presented to you today, passed and adopted on this day, July 17th, 2023. Thank you very much for your service. Would you like to say something?
Thank you for the recognition, and it was an honor to work for 24 years for the Waunakee Police Department and to work with most of you here in this room. So thank you again, and I will miss many of you.
A great way to start a meeting. All right. Next up, reports. First up, Parks and Rec Committee.
Yeah, so the park committee met the Wednesday after our last board meeting out at Westbridge Park in the long overdue rainstorm. The main item that we discussed was the new park in the Golden Ponds addition to Westbridge on the north side of Cop Road. The exciting thing about that is after our new accessibility audit, the entire surface of that play area will be poured in place rubber surfacing for access. And we also discussed there's an individual who's interested in starting a new soccer club in the community, and the staff is going to work on helping him find a location for that.
Excellent. Wonderful. Plan Commission. Joe, would you like to?
No, not really. No. I honestly, I was not prepared for that one. I was looking at the police commission
All right.
stuff.
So I'll update then. Plan Commission met, we reviewed the site implementation plan for the Kilkenny West extension. We had some members from the church, First Presbyterian, that attended to inquire about the easement they have with their driveway. So that was a discussion that we had. We've gone over some other things that'll be happening in the future as well. It was a productive meeting. Joint Plan Commission. Do we have anyone that submitted a report for that? No. All right, so we'll skip the Police Committee.
For the police committee, we met on Tuesday, July 11th. Basically, it was a review of the last quarter of stuff. Service calls are up as they usually are over the summer. Like everywhere, staffing remains tight, both with patrol officers as well as administrative staff. And we reviewed some of the preliminary budget information for the upcoming budget. One other thing, just a reminder that the National Night Out is scheduled for August 9th. And that is always a good time.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a nice night out. Community Development Authority, we met and had two items, large items on the agenda. There have been a number of assembly bills. If you're looking at or interested in them, Assembly Bill 264 creates a Residential Housing Infrastructure Act. Assembly Bill 265 creates a Main Street Housing Rehabilitation Revolving Loan Fund Program. Assembly Bill 268 creates a Commercial to Residential Conversion Revolving Loan Fund Program. All of these are under WIDA. And Assembly Bill 267 makes various modifications to the Workforce Housing Rehabilitation Loan Program administered by WIDA. So we discussed these in relation to the Waunakee Housing Betterment Fund. And we don't know exactly how these will be administered by WIDA yet, but we're very much looking forward to the new programs that'll help us provide more equitable access to housing. All right, and then next up, Waunakee Committee. That is also me. Waunakee was successful. We had, it was a wonderful event. Thank you guys for coming to it. We had close to, we're not sure, an estimate of probably at least 20,000, possibly as many as 25,000 attendees there. A good time was had by all. It was a safe event, a really great event out. It was completely paid for and covered by our donors. We're looking next year probably to make some small adjustments in hiring a crew to help us clean up afterwards because the committee was there until 3 a.m. And that's a pretty late night when they start at 6 a.m. that morning and work the day before to get it all ready. So we'll discuss more as that event comes around next year. And last, do we have any other committees, boards, or commissions that should be reported on tonight?
EMS.
EMS, thank you.
Yeah. I'll go in reverse order what we did. We had the first offer from the labor union that represents the EMS employees. So that'll be an ongoing process for the next 2 months. And then the other item is your update for what occurred for presentation of changes to the EMS charter, so to speak. So they watched this, as I learned. It was a very spirited discussion. I can't say that we made a lot of progress. And it's going to be, they took some of the feedback that we had about some of the items. Some of the municipalities took it not in a direction that we would have liked and felt very strongly about it. And we are going to have to probably spend a little bit of time working with some of the other communities to help them explain our position better as far as to why we're asking and how things have changed since 1979 that necessitates Waunakee asking for some changes to the way that the committee and the district are set up, just so that it's more equitable to the village. I'm going to stop there because that's being very charitable to what happened in that meeting.
I thank you for your service and for your work on these changes. They're important, and as we know, we've discussed them in session here, and feel strongly that we need to make some positive movement forward. All right, that ends our committee reports. Next up, we have presentations, and we are on item number 2, a legislative district update by State Representative Alex Dors and Senator Diane Hesselbein. Thank you very much for coming to talk to us today, and you have the floor. Thank you.
Okay, great. It seems like it's still green, yes? Fantastic. I'll do this for both of us. Can we move it? We can't? That's really great, you guys. Anyway, yeah, it's fun. Anyway, so we haven't really planned anything. Come up with me. So we're going to talk a little bit about the shared revenue bill that we've heard a lot about, the budget that passed the state of Wisconsin that Governor Evers signed, and then a couple other bills that we've been working on. But this is also a chance for you to tell us some things that you've seen or heard that you want us to be working on. Certainly the affordable housing stuff that passed is pretty exciting. We're looking for more exciting bipartisan stuff to happen. Just not this summer, maybe this fall. So anyway, the shared revenue bill, I have been coming here since 2012, since I was first elected. And it's something that every single board has talked with me about, is the absence of shared revenue. So I can't tell you how excited I was to finally be able to start session, and the Republicans and Democrats were talking in the same choir book. We're like, we have to get this done. We have to get this done for municipalities. So I was really excited when Governor Evers put it in the budget. Thought the numbers were fantastic. Unfortunately, when the Republicans came out with their proposal, there are a lot of what I would consider poison pills in that legislation, a lot of dictating what people could do, especially to the city and the county of Milwaukee. I was not in favor of. But with that being said, the governor has a different job than I do. I made motions in the Senate. I think the Assembly did as well, to try to take all those poison pills out of there and just have a straight vote on the money. because we've heard from, Rhinelander to Waunakee to Potosi, we talked about earlier, everyone wants shared revenue. But unfortunately, in the end, the Republicans would not strip those terrible things out of that bill. So I voted no. It got pretty interesting on the floor in the state Senate, but they did have the votes to pass it, and the governor signed it into law. For Waunakee, that's a supplemental, the total is 514, 936. I know all the other village board chairs before you are like, wouldn't it be nice, right? Because this is a great spot for you to be in with your budgeting practices, that you're going to be able to have that money because you've been starved for so long. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what all the municipalities do with this upper.
Yes, and I'll just make a note going back to what the senator said about the governor's proposal. Under the governor's proposal in his budget, I believe the village saw a 500% increase in their shared revenues. So that's what Diane and I were really fighting for. I apologize for my voice. I've been struggling with the air quality the last weekend, so I'm straining a little bit, but and that's what I was doing in the assembly. The shared revenue bill came first to us, and we were looking at only an average of 10% increase compared to the governor's of 20%. Through some very aggressive negotiations, our negotiators were able to get that number back up to 20%, which was a good an average of 20%, I should say, which was a good feat. But like the senator said, I think there are a lot of difficult pieces to that shared revenue bill that I think that we'll have to continue to look through as we go on in this session to see what we can, make sure that is not a string attached to that shared revenue.
Exactly. And I think one interesting thing to note, when I know at the assembly, I don't know if people voted for it. Maybe a few people voted for the Democratic side. But we were told this whole time that we will not need Democratic votes to vote for this. The Republicans will pass it without you. We don't need you. We don't want you. We know what you want, and we're not going to give this to you. And so it was like, we're pushing for it, we're pushing for it, we're pushing for it. And finally, about half an hour before the vote, it was obvious they didn't have the votes. So push. So it's kind of such an interesting precedent when they say that sort of thing, because we have a lot of bills in there that are probably a close margin of victory to get these things done. And now what I'm telling all of them is you can have Democratic votes to get these things done. It doesn't have to be one party rule. So those conversations are happening and ongoing in the Senate. And so that makes me happy that I'm thinking that maybe some good can happen in the fall. And with that, should we go to the budget? Do you want to talk about the budget?
Sure.
Okay.
So I think a lot of you saw the budget proposal that the governor put out in February. It feels like a millennium ago. And it had a lot of good proposals. And one that I want to speak to specifically was the Child Care Counts program, something that I've been here in Waunakee talking a lot about with our child care providers in this community, and how important that funding was to be able to sustain our child care industry, make sure the workforce is there to be able to support our children. This was 340 million to be able to continue and just sustain that program that started during COVID. I heard, actually, this was probably the most that I've heard from constituents on one issue during the budget process. It was very significant. A lot of community members from Waunakee talking about the importance of having affordable and accessible childcare. That's something that was included in the budget that was eventually removed and not restored. So that's what I'm going to be spending a lot of my time fighting for as I move forward. There are also policies like paid family leave that was included in the budget. I think it was a good start for the governor to put it there. Obviously, that did not succeed in the final budget. There are other good pieces to the budget that we were happy to see. However, these larger policy items are something that we're going to have to continue to push for in this coming legislative session, because our shared constituents were really in favor of these policies, and that's something that we're going to keep pushing for as we move on.
Absolutely. And of course, along with childcare, I think one of the things that I've heard most about is education funding. The governor had a bold plan for K-12 schools, colleges and universities, technical, UW system. And unfortunately, the Republicans decided to gut the university system by $32 million, which is reprehensible. So these all these terrible things made it, easy to vote no because of all these terrible provisions. But the governor has a powerful tool, his veto pen, and he was able to use it creatively and create. Now, people have said, if that was in front of you, would you have voted for it? I don't know, right? That 32 million would have still gotten in my craw with the university system. And we could have done better with special education funding and mental health funding. The governor was very bold in his proposals as well, and those were soundly rejected by the Republican Party. But there is a glimmer of hope. Ever since like I said, when I was first elected in 2012, I've always had like some Waunakee thing. And if Roberta here, she'd probably agree with me because she's reported on these listening sessions, or I find out somebody has unemployment insurance issue. So I work on a bill to try to solve the problem, but there's always been some great policy from Waunakee that somebody brings to me. And honestly, this year we've heard over and over again from the very brave Michelle Coleman, whose son Cade died from fentanyl poisoning a few years ago at UW-Milwaukee. And at first it was, she'd get all these parents together to talk with us about what we could do on university campuses. When Tommy Thompson was UW system president, he was able to work with all the college campuses to make sure that Narcan is available all over those campuses and in the dorms, which can save lives. With Michelle and others, they were able to put, we actually had a bill. And late in the game, they had that 999 motion where they put a bunch of stuff in it. And one of these things was to make sure that Narcan was available at all K-12 schools. And we had a hearing on it in the Senate, and it was not well received by everybody, to be honest. Even Department of Public Instruction had a lot of feedback that they had some resistance to it. But I was really happy to see that this got in. They're looking at making it accessible for students to always have it there, but have it in a place where if students or people have loved ones that are maybe using some sort of product, they can take this home and have it just in case. So actually having a lot of it available for people is extremely important. It's not just the K-12 public, but it is also in our private schools as well. So I think this could be a real game changer, and it's hard to know how many lives that will save. But if it saves one life, it's absolutely worth it. So working with Department of Health Services and DPI, Michelle Coleman, when Alex and I were able to get that through. So that was something that I'm really happy about. Something also that we're working on, we just heard last week, is mental health funding with the schools and how that is working and somehow not working. And so we've been working with some mental health care providers in the area to strengthen and look at what Minnesota is doing. So be kind of on the lookout for that, because you've got some really great knowledgeable people that are educating us on the importance of mental health for our students.
Yeah, I would just say similarly in closing, always looking forward to hearing from you all. I know I've met with a handful of you already, but if you have ideas that you want the Senator and I to look at, we're more than happy to hear them and seeing how we can move our state forward and continue on that path. So thank you.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that we can be doing? This is kind of an open.
Yeah, I'll express my strong support for the childcare bill. I was shocked.
Yeah.
Not just in our community where we desperately need to expand childcare as all communities, but across the state. We hear this in rural communities. We hear this in some of our most remote places, that there isn't a strong enough, deep enough pool of childcare workers, and the employers of childcare workers have a hard time making those wages make sense for somebody to take a job in childcare. So I was really shocked, because that seems to be a bipartisan issue when you talk to constituents, that that didn't pass. And thank you very much for the work on the Narcan as well. That is, because of our experience here in our community, incredibly important. So thank you. Yeah. Other comments or questions? None?
All right. We'll look forward to seeing everybody at Waunakee at the parade.
Exactly. Yeah, we will be
Feel
there.
free to go out. You'll get some candy. Or if you want to walk with us, there's always that availability.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming today, Alex and Diane. We appreciate it. Yeah. All right, next item on the agenda is presentation of Village Sustainability Report by UW intern Claire Olson.
And I'll do a brief introduction for Claire. So thanks to our partnership with University Year, they remain engaged with us in asking us when there's tough problems to call on them and see how the university can help. So I don't know, about 6-7 months ago, I received a call or an email from a student at our high school here who leads an organization at the school looking at sustainability and climate change concerns. And he had a number of questions for me, and I found myself struggling to point to the list of things the collective list of things that we've done, because I know all of our departments have done an array of things in relation to sustainability. We just haven't put pen to paper on what we've been doing. And I thought that it would be a good start before we take a next step in anything sustainability related to essentially audit the work we've done and archive that work for our knowledge as well as the knowledge of the public. So what University Year did was connect us with a capable student, which is Claire Olson. I'll let her give a little bit more to who she is and what she's studying. And they connected us to Claire, and we did an internship with her over the course of the summer here. And she's engaged our department heads to do that audit and do that archiving of our sustainability work to date. So I'm not going to take much more of her thunder, but I will reference that the report is in front of all of you at the dais there. So she's prepared this report. We will use this report to populate information on our website as well to make that all available. And with that, Claire, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself. And I think you want to share screen with the presentation, right?
Thank you very much, Todd. Yes, I will share my screen. Can everybody hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
yeah.
Wonderful. Share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Wonderful. So yeah, like Todd said, my name is Claire. I'm a sustainability intern at UW. I'm studying sociology with the certificates in environmental studies and public policy. So this was a great intersection of all of those interests. And so, yes, this is a sort of compiling everything I learned after talking with all of the department heads. So let's get right into it. First one to talk about Waunakee Utilities. It's a community-owned nonprofit which makes renewable options affordable. It's only an extra $2 a month to get all of your energy from renewable sources. They also have a lot of great community outreach programs that help inform the public on renewable options. That picture there is from the National Theater for Children, which is sponsored by Waunakee Utilities. And we'll talk more about that later in the presentation. Now, Utilities has some awesome partnerships with Focus on Energy. So they have rebates for a lot of different transitions to renewable appliances. They have an Energy Star certified appliance rebate, and they offer free energy saving packs, excuse me, through their partnership. Waunakee has a lot of great solar installations. Notably, the high school and the intermediate school have installations, but the one specific to the village would be the public library. Here's a picture of it on the side. For outreach, Waunakee Utilities has some amazing outreach programs. They have Public Power Week, which is offered yearly, which is something different every year. One year they had a food drive where you could bring food and get LED light bulbs. They have a energy education program, which helps incorporate energy education into school curriculums. They have the Wellness and Energy Fair every year. And that picture from earlier, the National Theater for Children, which they sponsor. Now, Waunakee is a certified tree city. This means that they celebrate Arbor Day. They planted a bare root garden. They have an arborist come and lecture at the elementary school, and they have 30 to 35 trees planted annually, in addition to the trees that are added with development. A new tree is planted for every 60 feet of street frontage. Now, Waunakee is also a bird city, which involves building birdhouses with kids and putting them in prairie lands. Annual education events with a focus on birds and celebrating World Migratory Bird Day. So the Monarch Butterfly Campaign, which involves the mayor's Monarch Pledge, planting milkweed, restoring prairie lands, and displaying educational signage in the monarch habitats. Waunakee has some amazing green spaces that have done some great preservation or restoration, but I wanted to highlight these four. Excuse me. The first one is Bowles Conservancy, which has 15 acres of natural prairie land. Then we have Rip Park, which has a ½ acre of restored prairie land. There's Castle Creek Conservancy, which was home to the World Migratory Bird Day tree planting event, which is part of Waunakee's Bird City certification. And then O'Malley Marsh, which has an oak savanna and some preserved wetlands. Now, some other sustainable practices that definitely need to be mentioned are the controlled burns to contain invasive species, the library's green roof in addition to the solar installations, and the 6 Mile Creek shoreline restoration and creek clearing. Going off of 6 Mile Creek, there are some beautiful murals around Waunakee that remind the public that the storm drains drain to 6 Mile Creek. And those are wonderful. We're part of the Saltwise community or program, which means that public works staff have received training to drastically reduce salt use on roads. For village buildings, they all have LED lights. The village center in particular has some great sustainability initiatives. They have automated HVAC systems that fluctuate based on need, efficient water heaters. They host visits to Schumacher Farm, where people participate in outdoor environmental activities. And they're partnered with the DNR and UW to monitor 6 Mile Creek. Based on everything I learned, I came up with 2 general recommendations. The first one I found was the Dane County Sustainable Leaders Collaborative, which is an amazing program hosted by the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate, where all the municipalities in Dane County can work together to come up with sustainable solutions. Different department heads can communicate with each other and think about ways to improve. It's pretty low commitment, mostly educational and collaborative. My second recommendation was a sustainability resolution. This is also very open-ended. Resolutions could look really different. It could be a resolution to create a task force of experts to decide what's the next step in sustainability. It could be, committing to converting some % of the village's energy to renewable by a certain date. Mostly just something so that as Waunakee is growing and developing, that sustainability is always on the mind. But yeah, I understand that each situation is unique, and I can't tell you exactly what the right next step is. Only give some general advice. Thank you all. This was an amazing opportunity. It was so wonderful to speak with all the department heads. A big thank you to Todd Schmidt for facilitating this process. It was so amazing to work with all of you. And I will use everything I learned here for the rest of my life. So I really appreciate everything. I hope you all have a great rest of your evening.
Claire, do you have some extra time in case there's questions?
Oh, yes.
And I do, Claire and I apparently caught the same month-long summer cold.
Yes.
And you sound better than last time we talked, Claire. I probably do too, but we're both struggling through it. So I give you kudos for making your way through the presentation.
Yeah, and this wildfire smoke is not helping any of us right now. We'll say that. So thank you very much, Claire. This is Kristen Runge talking right now. When you say there are a lot of different directions, or there are a lot of different directions we can take, when you look at the different elements of sustainability in Waunakee that you studied, where do you think, if we were to make one next move, what would you recommend? And I know you said that it's difficult to recommend or you can't recommend one specific direction, but is there anything that might be a low hanging fruit or something that we should be thinking about doing over the next year or two?
That's a great question. Yeah, as someone who's not a local Waunakee resident, I hesitate to step in and say, this is what you should be doing. But I think putting together a task force with a little more expertise than I have is really the best next step. Excuse me. And reaching out to the Dane County Sustainable Leaders Collaborative.
All right, thank you. Other questions or comments we've got for Claire? And it's a great report, by the way. This will be really
Thank you so
useful
much.
for us. Just to say thank you,
Thank you so much.
Joe.
Just one thing I'm kind of curious about. One of the items listed in here talks about planting 30 to 35 trees annually. I'm wondering, are those in addition to replacements as well, or are some of them replacements, or sort of what's that ratio?
That's a great
And
question.
that might be a Bill thing. I'm not sure, but.
Yes, that I believe that would be a question for Bill.
Most of those are for our new trees. We're adding in the parks in the open area spaces of
Okay.
those 30 to 35.
Okay.
Yeah. The bare roots garden that we've started will be more for replacement trees in the terrace areas.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments?
I can note that the village has made connections with Dane counties and the work that Dane County is doing on the sustainability efforts. We've established some initial connections there. I've reached out to the director and we're willing to continue that connection and collaboration there. Also, the student who I mentioned earlier brought this up half a year or so ago. Just today, he emailed me a sample resolution, mentioned that he's perhaps spoken to a couple of the trustees already. And I'll be meeting with him in early in August to talk about next step that he and the student group that he leads are interested in collaborating with us on. I'd note too that that group is closely engaged with the Dane County sustainability work and collaborate across the county with other student-led groups and other groups across the area.
Excellent. That's really exciting. I love it when our young people get involved.
And I know we don't have action in front of the board today, but if there is any direction that you'd care for staff to pursue, happy to discuss that now, or if we can set up a time in the future to discuss it in more detail.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much, Claire. We appreciate it. This is a great report. I have a feeling we're going to continue to talk about this over the next few months. So your work was well worth it.
Wonderful. I can't wait to see what happens.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Next item up on the agenda then is business item number 1, discuss and take action on splash pad options, including a presentation by aquatics consultant, architecture and planning. This is on page 21 of your portfolio, of your packet.
And I turned to my friend Sue and asked if she would help the guy who's barely able to talk introduce this, and she says, go for it. How friendly. I'm going to turn on your microphone just in case you want to chime in there. Well, I do want to note that this has spent some time in the works, and on the heels of the failed referendum for an aquatics facility, staff was tasked by the village board to pursue and research options related to a splash pad that could be incorporated into our array of recreation offerings in the community. We've done that, and you authorized us to continue our engagement with a third-party consultant to help us as we had funding still available from the aquatics work we already done. In that, we hired Parkitecture as the company to help us along the way. Sue can probably do a better job of introducing Blake and the work that they do. But we've probably had, what would you say, 5 or 6 staff level engagements to review potential locations. We provided the best feedback we could along the process. Blake dove deep, which isn't smart to do in a splash pad, right?
True, very true.
That's what, yeah, right. So I get a little bit for that? Okay. And we went from a large list, essentially analyzing every park with potential acreage to afford the space for a splash pad, and narrowed that down by, for various reasons, crossing certain locations off the list because they simply couldn't accommodate this sort of facility. And we've come down to a point where Blake is going to show you a couple of options that we collectively believe are viable. And we've got details on those locations, those costs, and then Blake's going to do a much better job than I have at talking about the background and how we've gotten there. Sue, what do you want?
Sue, this is your chance.
Your light's green.
Blake, we welcome you. We very much appreciate the time that we've spent with you over the last few months. I dare say if you've splashed in a splash pad in Dane County or greater Wisconsin in the last couple of years, chances are Blake was a part of those. I personally took my granddaughter to Sun Prairie to play a couple weekends ago, and she said, "Grandma, your friend is very talented." So let's hear what you've got. We do have a presentation. Jared, can you bring that up on the screen?
So thank you guys for that introduction, and thank your granddaughter, because that's the best. So I'm going to open, or I guess, work on the next chapter of your long-standing pursuit for some sort of community aquatics element.
It's coming.
Maybe.
It's on its way. And remember, just a little delay with the click.
You got it.
So it should be going to presentation mode here. There we go.
So I'm Blake Tyson. I'm the primary owner of Architecture and Planning. We are based just down the road in Middleton. We do work all over the state of Wisconsin, Iowa, greater Midwest, and occasionally in some random far-flung state in the country if the right request has been made. One of our primary focuses is aquatics. And as Sue mentioned, I think we have touched now over 60 splash pads. Almost all of those have been in Wisconsin. So very good odds if you've been in one, it was at our hand. So I assume, Todd, I'm pointing this at you.
You click the on button on the side.
You asked me to do that and I did not. Yeah, you gave me very good directions to do so.
It changed on my screen, so it's gonna change.
All right, perfect. So as I mentioned, aquatics is one big section of work that we do. We do all kinds of other stuff, multidisciplinary firm. So my partner and co-owner is Katie McDonald. She is the yin to my yang. I'd push things too hard and she pulls me back and makes sure it's realistic to get done. So we're a good team. Currently, these are the aquatics projects that we're working on. So again, we are very well immersed in the current pool code and all the rules and regulations regarding public and private aquatic facilities here in Wisconsin. So I'm going to start with a little 101 because I'm going to assume no one knows anything about splash pads, even though I'm sure you do, because you've been talking about this for a long time. A splash pad means there is no standing water at any time. Anything over a quarter height is considered standing water in terms of the pool code. So we have to be very, very careful about drainage systems and slopes on the concrete in a splash pad. There are two types. One can be a flow through, which essentially is a giant sprinkler. The other option is what we call a recirc system. And that means you use the water, capture it, treat it, and then reuse it again. That type of system becomes designated as a public pool, which I'll get into here in a second. Splash pads can be a standalone or an integrated facility. And when I say integrated, Sue's example of the Sun Prairie is an integrated playground and splash pad within an existing park. A standalone can be kind of a destination splash pad, either in a park or in an urban setting. Very different approaches in design as to how you get people in and out and move through those spaces. And of course, they can have a huge range in size and how they function. These two examples I picked just because they're very recent and fun. This integrates lighting, so it becomes a nighttime activity as well. This is a good example of an integrated facility where we have wet and dry play in the same environment. So back to the fun dynamics of the state pool code. So there are various chapters of the pool or the state code that dictate how a splash pad functions, but this is the one that really controls things. And the key point here is that 50,000 gallons per day. If you exceed that water usage, you are automatically triggering yourself as a recirc, right? So in the name of sustainability, that is the threshold that becomes mandated to move into essentially operating a public pool. So a little bit about flow throughs, as I mentioned, less than 50,000 gallons a day. When we discharge that water, so the effluent or the water that is used on the pad goes into our drain and then leaves our site, the DNR does require an annual permit to prove that it has been dechlorinated. And essentially by dechlorinating water, you're entering oxygen into the system and reducing the parts per million of chloramines. And that's as far as the science I'm going to give you tonight. But running it down a storm pipe so many feet does the job. Running it through a riprap pocket will do the job. Running it into a rain garden will do the job. It's a very easy thing to accomplish, but I just wanted to make the note that every year there is a very short piece of paper you fill out to prove that you are following the rules. Splash pads do not require any type of perimeter fencing or enclosure that a recirc does, nor does it require daily staff monitoring. So again, as I mentioned, a flow through is very similar to a very large sprinkler or irrigation system that you might have on an athletic facility. It also is very similar to your annual water main flushing that happens throughout communities. So a lot of people always ask me, well, Blake, why are we shooting all this water down the storm sewer? It happens all the time and you just don't know it. So some of the fun facts on recircs, these are a couple of images. You can see how the dynamic of a splash pad changes when you completely enclose it in fencing and gates. This particular facility is an integrated playscape with the dry play here and the wet play. And if anyone is a Nintendo nerd, this is for you. Those are concrete culverts that we planted, just like the tubes in the old Super Mario Brothers game. So that's for you. This is a typical underground element that goes along with a recirc system. So what you're seeing here is the underground storage tank, the dechlorination unit. This was actually a chemical application due to a protected waterway. So the additional cost of a recirc system upfront is somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000 on the front end, depending on how big your size and what other issues you need to address. So talked about barriers, water treatment. Obviously a recirc, you're going to have chemical additives in your system, just like a pool, to make sure that that water is free of E. coli and other nasties that may come out. You are required to have restrooms within a certain distance of your pad. Not all facilities have that access, and that becomes a very costly additive to the project. Showers are required. So one rinse off shower, just like a pool, is required. And to Todd's comment earlier, a recirc splash pad actually requires a sign that says no diving, which seems crazy, but it is a requirement. You must have a hardline telephone. Okay, cell phones do not work. A dedicated first aid station and daily staffing. So there's a lot of extra stuff that goes along with a recirc, and there's an absolute time and place for both a flow through and a recirc. In your case, how do I feel bad? I'm pointing this laser right at you. All right, so I'll get to your case in a second, but some other points to note. I talked about the destination facility and the integrated wet and dry. We often see some of those first images I showed you with the lighting, in a smaller setting, maybe an urban plaza or a small pocket park. We see a lot of the old wading pools in bigger aquatic complexes being converted. The 18-inch depth water that essentially becomes a place for toddlers to go to the restroom. Those are getting pulled out on a very high frequency, and splash pads are becoming the new footprint for those areas. The biggest thing for me, I have a sibling with disabilities, and it's become part of our standard mantra to every project we touch is well beyond standard ADA requirements. Splash pads have become one of my favorite things because they are truly universal in ADA. And not only that, but they appeal to the youngins and the older folks and everyone in between. So I've got some great photos of a senior soccer club playing on a field right next to a splash pad. And after they were done, we've got all these gray hairs, no offense to anyone in the room with gray hair, but enjoying the splash pad on a very hot day, which was awesome. I'm trying, Todd. There we go. All right. Some other things to consider as we start to look at a design and layout of a splash pad. You know, sometimes you can get really heavy into theming. If you've been to the Fitchburg splash pad, that is very heavily themed after the historic farmstead property that it occupies. Seating and shade are critical elements. And unfortunately, one of the first pieces that communities try to cut out of a project budget is the shade. And the parking is second, and we always push back on those two because they're so critical to success. I guarantee if they get cut, you'll hear about it later. You know, we love to bring lighting into projects. I think it's a great way to get more out of your dollar. You know, when a splash pad is not in operation, you know, we have 3 months essentially of operable season here in Wisconsin. So by adding in lighting, you can then activate that space in the shoulder months, and sometimes even in winter by making it an art installation. So that's been a real fun introduction into some of the projects around. Regardless of whether you do a flow through or recirc, I think having access to restrooms and changing rooms are critical. As Sue saw in Sun Prairie, we have both, and they're separate on either side of the pad. And for those families with young kids, it's much easier to get into an outdoor changing area than to go into a small restroom stall that isn't really designed for 2 people. And we know that the turnover rates on changing facilities and restrooms are different. So we like to have both when we can. Obviously, safety is critical when we think about the circulation and making sure we have appropriate access for EMS vehicles and crews in case something should happen. We always follow state requirements, of course, and just I wanted to give you this number as a general rule of thumb. And that is an absolute, like, stuffing the sardines in a can number, but 25 square feet. So that's a 5 by 5 square per person on a splash pad is really, really tight. But that is the sort of max number we use when we're planning out a space. So keep that in mind. I'll address that later. I wanted to mention the lighting again, just because I think it's so critical and so important to enhancing that space that you're spending a bunch of money on. So these are this is actually the rendering, and that's the reality of the project. So pretty dynamic spaces once they're activated. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, and this is really for Todd, but for as long as I've been doing splash pads, I always get the question, can we flood it in the winter and use it for ice? Because it's a big flat piece of concrete. And I've always said no, because I really don't like the idea of putting frozen water over top of pipes underground. But we have now started getting into synthetic ice. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it, if you've ever skated on it, but it's actually an amazing solution. So this is Two Rivers. The splash pad is here, as you can see in the renderings. This entire concrete ribbon is synthetic ice in the winter, actually October through, I think they're doing it through April 1st. And we had the grand opening of this park yesterday. So we're really excited. The ice is going down here in about 2 months. So we'll have a full report for you as to how that works out. But really exciting. I think we're doing it in 2 other parks now. So it's going to become a pretty common, maybe not the right word, but it's going to become a new thing here. We're going to see more and more. Okay, so there's your 101, maybe in a 102. So how do we get from there to actually doing a pad in Waunakee? So as Todd mentioned, we did start big. We looked at 8 sites. Well, we maybe even started bigger than that, but we came down to 8 sites that really had potential. And I know you can't read that, but these little yellow pins on the map are the sites that we took a look at. And from there, we looked at what is the connectivity for bike ped, for motor vehicles? Do we have the appropriate infrastructure already on site, or is that going to be an additional cost to bring in? Obviously, that is a big change in budget when you have to do so. Do we have adequate parking? We know from experience, and you've probably seen it, that splash pads do bring people to the park. So we want to make sure that, again, we either had it or we have the capability to add it. And of course, do we have appropriate slopes and the ability to make our facilities fully ADA accessible? So out of the 8 we really studied, we came to 3 that rose to the top and felt like, okay, these are real potentials. We could get this done. Of course, RIP and Centennial are existing parks. They are, I'll say, construction ready. Heritage Hills is a little bit off in the future, but we did have some dialogue with the developers. We looked at some spatial allocation diagrams to see if it would actually fit and how that might change the development plans if that was the best candidate. So these are very schematic concepts. The exercise was really focused on, okay, what do the footprints look like? What is our space that we're allocating? How does that impact the rest of the park usage? So at RIP, we had adequate parking, we have restrooms and shelter, we have great trail connections, we have a place to take our storm or our water discharge. So what we did is we put in a footprint of a splash pad and a dry playground, because if we're doing this after the ADA audit, it really made sense to look at a fully inclusive and ADA compliant playscape. So you'll see all the concepts I'm going to show you have that sort of combo feel. So this is where we ended up. We did look at several spaces within RIP and felt that this was really the best location within the park, given the other facilities and amenities that were provided. So Centennial spent quite a bit of time working through this one. This is the location of the existing playground, and then this is where the swings are. This one actually worked really well. You've got plenty of parking here, plus the south lot. You've got 4-season building, open air shelter, lots of flexible space, great trail connections all the way through, and an opportunity to even expand your hardscape plaza space next to that building. Heritage Hills, we ended up deciding was not one of the best options because it was not ready for development. And if it still may be a possibility in the future, but I think that of the 3, we all settled on Centennial as being really the gem in the crown and the best option. It hits all the key trigger points for us. Plenty of parking, as I said. The connectivity was excellent. The roadway systems are quite wide, very easily to get to. It's signed, so everyone obviously knows where that is. We feel that it has an excellent opportunity for that combined dry and wet playscape. And we also think that there's an opportunity, given that this building is already set for 4-season use, to create a 12-month hub instead of just a 3-month hub in one of your other satellite parks. So we've sort of done a preliminary patio expansion. I'm showing some additional lighting and shade in that space. We like the fact that it's next to the ice, so it really could become, a 12-month gem. So all the core infrastructure is already there. The only thing that we would have to do is run storm or discharge from the splash pad out to the road, which we've explored, and we feel confident that that is readily achievable. It's central, and the biggest thing is it is ready to go. If you wanted to get it done, it is basically shovel ready site. In our initial concept layout, we did try to preserve the existing trees that are here and that hillside that separates the diamonds from the new playscape. So we're trying to preserve what is there, yet I'm suggesting we take out a part of that path and realign it. I'm actually going to go back, show you the bigger picture. Yeah, so you can see the old pathway came in here. Looking at the grades and trying to make things flow a little bit better, we'd like to realign that, give yourself a secondary loop through. That would remove the motor vehicle passage through that space, which really I was objecting to. We don't want motor vehicle opportunities anywhere we have small children playing. So we've cleaned this up a little bit, reclaimed some additional green space, and really kind of smoothed out the circulation patterns within the park. So this is the Sun Prairie example, and you can start to see how even with grade change, the playground is up above, the splash pad is down below. We've integrated pathways through this rock canyon, and just off the screen here, the hill slide brings you down to the level of the splash pad. So there's lots of different ways to get back and forth through the spaces, and it really becomes a dynamic destination for those community members. All right, so given that we settled on, or that the groups sort of settled on Centennial as our best option, we started to say, okay, well, what is this actually going to look like in terms of budget? And since we're at a very schematic bubble diagram level, I have some ranges of sort of the big areas of construction trade. General means mobilization. And if any of you have been through a construction project, contractors have a line called mobilization that pays for their moving equipment on to the site, moving it off, their bonding, their insurance, that type of stuff. And all gets lumped in that front end. Utilities, we will have a water hookup and the storm sewer, as I mentioned, connecting up to the street. Hardscape would include the pathways, some additional concrete, getting all of that in place. Splash pad equipment, I have a pretty good range. Again, depends on how big and elaborate we want to go in terms of theming and other aspects. But right now, the wet zone, which would be that colored concrete sort of eye in there, is drawn at about 3,500 square feet, which is on the bigger side, the bigger end for a flow through especially in Dane County. If you've been to Middleton, that is right around 3,400. So it's bigger than Middleton. Fitchburg is a recirc, and it's right around that 3,600 mark. We've found that once you get beyond that, you really start to trigger the need to go to a recirc, because the amount of features and flow that you have on a space that big really wants to push you in that direction. So again, playgrounds can be a huge range. That could go up, it could go down, depending on how elaborate you want to get with equipment and surfacing. We are factoring in those numbers using poured in place, which is the rubber surfacing, which is very friendly for ADA. We've got a chunk in here for site amenities, which would be, lighting, shade, benches, bike racks, other, site related improvements. And then we have a healthy number in for landscaping, new trees, planting areas, restoration. And then soft costs, which would be design, permitting, engineering, those types of things. So I know this is a big range, but I think that somewhere in that range is a sweet spot to get you a really fantastic destination space, and not only set you up as a great splash pad for Waunakee, but again, looking beyond that in a 12-month node of activity. So I will pause there and take any questions.
And I'll add that in no way has staff settled on this as the only location. We're definitely open to hearing more from you if you care for us to research things in other directions. I can share that Veridian was very open to having conversation with us about changing the conceptual plans that they've laid out for their Grand Central Park. They're willing to do that with us. It's just it's not going to be quick. It's going to take time for them as they work the development west-east to incorporate that into their park plans, but they're willing. It also doesn't keep us from possibly talking to Veridian someday about adding a second wet element into our parks planning. The reason we like the idea of a green space, meaning newly constructed park in a development, is that we can sort of harness the investment that they have to make already within parks as part of the development requirements, and collaborate then to maximize their dollars and ours to bring a wet element to a park there. So anyway, I wanted to let you know how our discussions went with them and there was willingness there.
Yeah, that's a good catch on my word choice. Maybe I should have said landed instead of settled, because it definitely wasn't a settle. I think we were all really excited about the opportunity at Centennial. Heritage has the opportunity of that collaboration piece, and we really are seeing a lot of communities have their primary splash pad, their destination facility in a community park, such as Centennial, and then a secondary wet element in a second space in their community that might be more similar to one of the smaller at grade pads that I showed you with the lighting. That might be a really good sort of secondary element somewhere else in the community, such as Heritage. So,
All right, what questions or comments do we have?
Okay, I think this is for staff. If we, I know we're not there yet, but I'm wondering if we decide to go ahead with a project like this, if we would have fundraising and something like that, because fundraising takes time, and perhaps by the time we'd raise the funds, plans would come together with a new site. That's just a thought that I have.
I think a park like this presents a special opportunity for fundraising. I know, at least I know for sure. Oop. I was saying that I believe a park like this has a good opportunity for fundraising. I know that Rotary specifically has talked about, has been setting aside money with the thought that a splash pad could be a project that they help champion.
Sam, did you have
I guess I like the Centennial location from a glance. I would agree with overall having a second location at Heritage Hills, something smaller than, you have one on each side of the village, and I think both would get fairly extensive use.
All right, Robert, did you have?
Yeah, so I will also agree that Centennial seems to be the best location. I also will agree with the secondary location in the future. I'm not a huge fan of, since it's going to attract children. If you're on one side of the village, you're going to have to cross a county highway at one point. And then if you put up in Heritage Hills, you may also be crossing another county highway. So if we have two locations in the future, long-term, at least we would have some equity in how it's placed in the village. But I think that this would be a great thing to enhance Centennial, especially as a frequent ice skater in the winter. Centennial would be great to see that have a like a true 4-season usage. I know that with the Rotary having set aside some money, and I read about that last year when the referendum failed, but is there like a estimated dollar amount, or is this like way too early to even ask them that question?
I think it's too early. What they would probably like to understand is if there's a target that fundraising might be set at, that they could help us in accomplishing and pursuing that amount in collaboration with others. Obviously, there's corporate membership in Rotary. There's corporate members throughout our community who might want to make this a special project on behalf of their companies. So we might want to set that target to help those groups go for it.
Okay. Secondary question, and I apologize, I don't have my parks items in front of me. Where is this park on the ADA list for like upgrades and things like that? Is it?
I don't have that list with me either.
That's fine. The only reason I ask is because could we consider that in the part of the cost, since it would be redoing the,
Absolutely.
just to mitigate part of it?
And it's definitely a park that had some deficiencies.
Yeah.
So that really is what makes replacing this playground in this project really attractive.
I'm not saying that we do any sort of accounting magic, but I mean, if it was already budgeted to have work done for ADA, I feel like that should kind of count a little bit towards credit towards the cost.
Exactly. I agree.
yeah, I want to say it was pretty high in the priorities in that study. And I know we had looked at the age of that structure, and it was of the older ilk in the village.
It is definitely on the top half of our priority
Yeah.
list for sure.
Thank you.
All right, Joe or Aaron?
My initial reaction is I think this location's probably pretty good. I would love to hear more about the others that didn't really make the cut and sort of the why behind that, but that's not something we need to go into today. I agree, a second location in the village long-term is, I don't want to say a necessity, but certainly it has a very appealing nature to it. I'm a little surprised. One of the things I've consistently seen with splash pads seems to be that there's kind of a visibility component to it. They tend to be in places where, you know, you drive by and you go, hey, look at that. That's kind of cool. Let's take the kids there. I'm not sure that this accomplishes that, and I'm not sure if that's good or bad.
Yeah, it's a really good observation. So we actually talked quite a bit about that very point, and which for me was the biggest selling point for Heritage Hills, that, you know, the opportunity for its elevation to maybe, you know, have a sort of a front door for Waunakee as you come from the east. I was really excited about that at first. And once I dove into their overall grading plan and I looked at the building massing, that went away pretty quick. Which for me really changed the dynamic of that park. I think that while I would love that ability to have the splash of color and attention in the community, I think, you know, the reality is we're building this for community members. We're not building it as a show off piece for Waunakee.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think there are some other communities in the county that maybe would go that route, but I don't feel that from you guys. So, I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I think that, you know, I think that Centennial still feels for me like the absolute right spot.
Yeah, it definitely feels, from an infrastructure standpoint, it definitely seems to make a lot of sense. The only other question that I had was one that we probably haven't fully explored and maybe isn't a big deal. Given this level of water use, is there any impact of any significance on Waunakee utilities?
I don't think we've looked that carefully at that build, have we? Did we?
No, I mean, we haven't run the water usage, but I mean, I know what your maximum is going to be,
Yeah.
right? It's going to be no more than 50,000 gallons a day.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare that there would be a significant impact on your water tower or, you know, availability of water. There are lots of ways that we can dial in the gallon usage to make sure that, you know, we're not impacting that negatively.
Okay.
Good question.
No, that's all.
I do want to, Joe, if I could come back to your
Yeah.
just prior point about visibility, that was kind of speaking my language, actually. The team got probably sick of me harping on wishing for this to be something that would be visible and generate kind of an attractive aesthetic that people would notice. That's why that spot right by Village Park where we put in the new basketball court recently was one that just like gleamed in as we looked at it. But parking, I mean, sure, there's room to put a splash pad there, but there's no parking. I mean, so immediately the three things that are really, as we can show you the list of 15 or so spots, and it's parking, bathroom facility, and utility access. Those were the three biggies. And if one was missing, all of a sudden we knew we had a really expensive and tricky element to solve that immediately made that particular site. The water wheel site was one from a visibility perspective that I also was kind of excited about. That's missing a couple of pieces that could be tricky. So that was definitely taken into account.
Yeah, from a logistics standpoint, really Centennial does seem to make a lot of sense.
What we did agree on though about Centennial is that's a busy park otherwise.
It is.
There's the softball use, the festival use, the winter ice use. And it's not Centennial isn't a low use street in our community. It's got some activity. So we will gain some reputation by others coming and using that park facility and seeing the facility there too, visibility wise.
But I do want to add to that point that the typical hours of usage of a splash pad are not in conflict with, you know, evening softball and other summer activities that I think that park really gets hammered for. So, you know, we did kind of look at, all right, was the distribution and allocation of use going to be a conflict. And I think we all agree that it was not going to be a challenge.
Excellent. Thank you.
Aaron.
Well, I think it would just be known as a hidden gem then, if no one can see it. And yeah, even like I think Waunakee there, then half the town will know about it the August after it happens. But thank you for your presentation. I'm excited about this. I think we heard a lot of interest and desire from people in the community throughout the aquatics planning process and looking at the pool that they want something, and this seems like a great like next step for us to offer in the parks. I think this could be full every single day. There's so many people that would love this. I really do appreciate the sentiment about them splash pads and their accessibility, and it's been an important part of getting to hang out with a friend of mine that really loves to be able to use them because they're an inclusive space. So I think that's would be a great option for us to offer. I think Centennial is very central. That was a popular location in our aquatics study. So I totally agree with all those. I love the idea of the ice and how it could be used 12 months a year. So if there's any, I think maybe that's not a right away thing, but if that's in the planning, that's an option. I think that would be really, really neat for us to consider and pursue. So.
I'll agree. I like the pedestrian accessibility of it, and that it's nestled in a residential or more residential area. How much would it cost to put ice in the first year? Is that in the 1.3 to 1.
Synthetic
Yeah.
ice.
Here I am running the cost
You're
up
gonna
right away.
be another 150 to 200 in synthetic ice. I mean,
Okay.
depending on how big you want to go.
Okay. All right.
When we talk about winter use there, essentially our reference point has been the existing way in which we've used it.
Mhm.
And Bill and his crew have done a nice job managing that space, the large, what's the size of that? No. So we didn't, your initial design doesn't have an integrated ribbon
Right.
effect to this design. Not that we could take it a step further in our designing plans. And if that's important to the board, we can talk about that. But we're envisioning ice in how we've been treating that space.
That said, I think we're all aware of the issues with current climate and temperature escalation. So at some point, Bill may not be able to maintain ice out there as nicely as he does now. So, alternative solutions like synthetic ice are probably going to become more common. And, there used to be one company that manufactured this stuff in Spain. And in the last 2 years, now there's 3. And we know of at least one more that's getting into it. So I think that genre is just going to continue to grow.
All right. Any other questions or comments? No, none?
For staff, what we're seeking from the board is really, we don't need formal action today, and we can bring it back for more discussion. Obviously, we're just unveiling this. You're good, Blake, I think. We're just unveiling this to you and simultaneously to the rest of the community. I assume Roberta will touch on this in her recap of the meeting, and you'll hear some dialogue. We can have this for additional discussion at a future board meeting where we as staff would be wanting to know if you want us to further pursue refining capacity to afford, capacity at timing to build, and feasibility within a particular time frame. So if that sounds like a good plan.
That's a great plan.
Okay.
Yeah. Can we afford it? When can we build it? When can I take my nieces and nephews there? So.
Okay, we can probably look to have that reasonably on our next agenda, I would assume, for that feedback.
All right.
I would ask that we,
Or is there work to do?
There's a little bit of work.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to ask that we err on the side of providing the board with more information than we need than just enough.
So with that said, if you can offer us giving us those parameters will help. Let us know what we perhaps missed on getting you today, or what other questions you might have, so we can make sure we get that to you. And maybe if you want to follow up with me, phone
Perfect.
call, email,
Yep,
let me know that bubble and we'll hit the mark for you.
excellent. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or directions for staff? No? Seeing none. All right, we're done with this item on the agenda. Thank you very much, Blake. It's very exciting to be talking about this. We have nothing left on the agenda. So
Move
does
to
anyone
adjourn.
have? Excellent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned at 7:20.